This week we're talking browsers, from the latest Servo update to the news with Chromium and maybe some repercussions for Chrome. We talk about desktop environments and Wayland, of course. We talk about the new Raspberry Pi's 16 gigabyte version, a new release of Linux Mint, and some interesting news with Sid Meier's Civilization and Linux, of all things. It's a lot of fun. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 185, recorded Saturday, January the 11th. The Butterknife Edge. Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It's time to get geeky with Linux, open source, all kinds of good stuff. And we've got the sort of the regular crew here on the Untitled Linux Show, and we are back, and we have got a lot to cover this week. My wife was asking me earlier, like, how long do you think you guys are going to go today? And I said, well, let me put it this way. There's 4 of us, and I've brought 2 stories as well. And she's like, oh, okay. I won't see you for the rest of the evening. Okay, that's fine. So
we'll try to get done before midnight.
Yes. In the interest of not going too late after midnight, we're going to dive into it, and Rob is going to start us out. You've got a story about the Servo browser and the important things, and I'm not sure how much sarcasm there is in there, but I have a feeling that there is at least some.
Of course, it's my story. Doesn't matter what it's about. There's going to be a little sarcasm. And, everyone's in technology on the tech podcast, they've talked about making a web browsing engine it's hard. It's not easy. And today, we're limited to a few browsing engines as ones used in Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. And I don't know why anyone would use that one, but they are. And these have all been around for a long time. And, they've been able to grow gradually with the web standards. Starting from scratch today would kind of be a nightmare. Well, the Servo browser engine is attempting to do just that. We've talked about them before. And I even tried it out, and I probably demoed it on the show briefly, or maybe I talked about my experience. I know I've tried it out. And we should also probably keep in mind that when I call Servo a new browser, it actually started over 10 years ago. Already is like 2012 by the Mozilla Foundation, and it's developed in Rust. So, it ideally, if they actually get the thing off the ground, it maybe could be a more memory safe browsing alternative. But, with all this, they keep chipping away at it and making a usable browser engine, and, probably in the drive to be the first usable Rust-based browser engine. And in fact, with their latest release, you are now able to log into Discord and read messages, but you still can't send messages. They're making improvements there. The latest release provides many other improvements, such as improved. You're going to need to know maybe some web technology lingo to understand what I'm going to say it here for most of these. Improved shadow DOM support. Enough XPath support is implemented now to get HTMX working. Servo shell nightly builds are now up to 20% smaller than they were before, so more efficiency there in the coding, it sounds like. Or the compilation. I don't know how, but they're smaller. Improved performance, which is always good for our future web browsing engine. And CSS transitions can now be triggered properly by script. But even with all these big improvements being worked on, they still have the time to target the really important stuff. Likely the features so many people have been screaming about, because people love this feature in pretty much everything they use. I'm not a fan. Some love it, some aren't so much. But this is a feature the Servo browser has been missing, and now Servo now supports dark mode, and will respect the OS platform dark mode within the Servo shell. So all I got to say about this update is it's good to see they're getting the important features out of the way, the things that you just can't live without with a web browser. Even though I've lived 20 years, well, I've lived longer than that, but I've gone 20 plus years with a web browser and no dark mode. So I don't know why this was a top priority.
Dark mode is a big deal for some people. For a certain group, it really is a big deal, and part of it's ice drain, right? That is part of the legitimate deal, especially those of us that have a tendency to just let the room get dark around us as the sun goes down, and we continue doing whatever we're doing. The less ice drain of dark mode is kind of a nice thing. So I get it. I understand why people really like it and consider it important.
Yeah.
Well, and monitors keep getting brighter and brighter with, the HDR specs and whatnot. So that bright white background just keeps getting brighter and brighter.
I will tell you, one of the first things that I did when I got my HDR monitor set up on KDE and it actually started working and giving me all the controls is I went into the SDR slider. I'm like, well, let's go all the way down with that. And so I kind of have my own dark mode set up just because SDR is dropped in brightness as well.
I like brightness, but even for those who like it, I don't know, let's just get the browser working first. Get it usable.
Yeah, well.
But for those of you who do, like you said, like to start in the day with a nice, bright screen or whatever to match the world and then go down to darkness when it gets dark out, I have a tip for that later, at least for the KDE users. The KDE users.
All right. I thought you were going to say something like sunglasses.
Yeah, they have transitions now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a pair of those. They don't adjust for the blue light.
All right, Jeff, let's talk about Lenovo. And interestingly, that Jeff is bringing the NVMe story. He is our resident NVMe expert.
Maybe not expert, or I can't talk to expert level all the time, but
in the context of this panel of the four of us, you are definitely the NVMe expert.
Okay,
you're definitely the hardware expert.
Yes. So, a recent finding of an issue within Linux is what this story is about, and we have some Gen 5 NVMe drives have encountered specific issues, and this has happened since June of 2023. And I should note this only occurs in very specific situations, but what happens is a Gen 5 drive, which normally runs at 32 gigatransfers a second, would negotiate down to 2.5 gigatransfers a second. Now, for those who may not be familiar with an NVMe drive, these are sometimes referred to as gumstick drives due to their small rectangular shape, and they function like an SSD, but use an M.2 interface, which is essentially a special small PCIe interface. These drives come in various sizes, with the smallest being a 2230 drive, and it tells you the physical size because the first number representing the width in millimeters and the second represents the length in millimeters. So 22 millimeters by 30 millimeters in the case of the small drive there. The longer the drive, the more flash memory it has on board, and therefore the more storage capacity it'll offer. In general, there's different densities in NAND storage and whatnot, but we're talking generalities here. Typically, these drives are mounted on the motherboard beneath a heatsink, so changing them on a consumer motherboard involves opening the case, usually using a tool like a screwdriver to remove the heatsink, placing the new drive in position, and then restoring the heatsink. So this means in general, they're not hot swappable. Now, I bring this up for a reason. So the issue I'm addressing today was discovered by Lenovo, and it became apparent when drives were hot swapped, a scenario much more common in enterprise and industrial settings than in consumer hardware. So Lenovo issued a series of patches to rectify this issue, and to quote Jaewee Sun of Lenovo, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, from the kernel mailing list, he said, and I quote, "When we do a quick hot add, hot remove test with a PCIe Gen 5 NVMe disk, there's a possibility the PCIe bridge will decrease to 2.5 gigatransfers from 32 gigatransfers a second. The issue is caused by commit. Now I'm going to skip over all the hex number and just give you the text version of what it is. It's a workaround PCI link training failure. And he goes on to say, although commits correct error reporting with the PCI failed link retraining patch and the patch revert to the original speed after PCIe failed link retraining that's another patch, have tried to fix similar issues, there's still a window for triggering the issue within a 1 second hot add, hot remove test. So besides commit, and then of course, it add PCIe set target speed, and that's the name of the commit, introduces two potential issues that might cause the removing of the 2.5 gigatransfers downstream link speed restriction to fail. So to summarize that, in essence, an initial patch was intended to address link speed training issues, inadvertently introduced further problems. So the Lenovo fixes targeting the hot plug testing code, and it fixes reading a wrong register fields during the retraining function. So there's a couple little things going on here. It sometimes wouldn't negotiate the speed properly, and in the hot swap sometimes it would read the wrong register fields, which would cause the drive to fail negotiation totally. Again, in these 1 second hot add, hot remove situations, which in enterprise can happen because people are shucking drives in and out for whatever reason at a high rate of speed, trying to be as efficient as they can and get as much work done as they can. So for more details and a link to the original Linux mailing list email, please refer to the article linked in the show notes. But soon we should see a patch so that even if you are hot swapping NVMe Gen 5, now that's another important point, here's Gen 5 drives, then you should be cleared up in the next kernel release.
Interesting. And as I liked what Quippy said, or what Keith 512 said, what this means in English was that the drive was reducing the PCIe generation from like PCIe 5 down to a lower level, like PCIe 3. And yes, that is the much simpler way to put it. Now, the important point here is this was only when hot swapping, right? So like this isn't something that we were going to see on Lenovo laptops we're running Linux on. This is what I first thought of when we introduced the story.
And that's why I wanted to specifically call out what NVMe drives are and how they're used in consumer motherboards, because a lot of times they're underneath graphics cards or they're not easily to get to places. So this is not something that you would encounter for people outside of enterprise or industrial applications.
So you don't think I'd have to worry about it with my 2009 Lenovo Think Center?
No. And you're not running PCIe 5 Gen 5 on that either.
Yeah.
or NVMe or anything like that at all.
Not unless I change out the motherboard.
That's probably still IDE.
Oh no.
No, you actually could run in there because the M.2 slot is basically PCIe. Mm-hmm. It's smaller but it's basically what it is. And you have simple adapters to go from NVMe to like U.2 and U.3 drive interfaces, and you can plug in boards into regular PCIe slots that you can hold several M.2 drives in it. So they're very compatible. I mean, they're pretty much the same standard.
I don't think anyone's doing a show story on it today, but did anybody else see what else Lenovo has announced this week?
No. So this week is CES, and I know we didn't get a whole lot of CES stuff into the show notes. Rob, go ahead and let us know. What did you see?
Well, the Legion Go, which is the Steam Deck competitor, except for unlike the other Steam Decks, this is actually going to have Steam OS on it. So it's the first third-party device that's going to have Steam OS.
Yeah, so we talked about this. We covered the made for Steam OS. I think that was what the badge is. and we sort of speculated that someone would come along and have one of these. We thought it might even be more like a smart, HTPC sort of hardware. But it's another handheld, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yep. So another Steam Deck. I don't have the specs in front of me, but $699. Looking for a release date of October. So
cool.
We'll talk more about that later on in the year.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. All right, Ken, we want to talk about. Yeah, Jeff.
Oh, I was just going to comment on that and say I think almost all the handhelds coming out, I bet 90% this coming year are going to have Steam OS versus Windows. Just because the Windows
versus
one
seemed to flop. Yeah, did not do well.
Yeah,
that'd be a big win. Win for Linux gaming.
It would be a very interesting niche. That would be a very interesting niche for Linux to have. We've talked for years about the year of the Linux desktop, and the joke has been that it's come in the form of Android. It's a very interesting niche that Linux is doing so well on mobile platforms.
Well,
I know two things that I will put on. One I'll cover later, but if you want to, Jonathan, I can give her the other one now.
Okay, I guess.
And that, of course, is Calibre.
Ah, yes. I think it's Caliber, isn't it?
You're
Didn't we get in
right.
trouble for calling it Calibre?
And I still slip into that occasionally when I'm thinking. Or not thinking.
Stop thinking that.
But let's go ahead and hear what Mariester wrote about developer Covid Goyos announcing the latest stable version of the powerful, cross-platform, free, and open source ebook management software that should be called Calibre. In this case, it's version 7.24. Now, Calibre is also one of my favorite applications, as I'd already mentioned, and version 7.24 introduces several new features to include the ability to create rules to transform ebook series names, which you can experiment with in the bulk metadata editor and also through preferences metadata download. Now, the new Calibre version introduces a new option to show a button that gives you quick access to all available actions from the status bar with a single click, which you can enable in Preferences, Look and Feel, Main Interface, Show Actions button. In answer to feature request, we now have a button to export the currently displayed list of words as a CSV file in the spell check feature of the Edit Book component, and the ability to choose the ebook cover as the format to save when saving single format to disk, and a checkbox to automatically convert obsolete ISBN 10 to ISBN 13 in the Add from ISBN feature. Calibre 7.24 also improves the ebook conversion feature by automatically setting the page progression direction for ebooks that don't have it set and have their primary language as either Arabic or Hebrew, and improves the content server's book details view to make Calibre //show dash book and Calibre //view dash book URLs work in the comments. As always, I recommend reading Marius' article that I have linked in our show notes to see what I didn't cover, and follow the links if you want to get a copy of Calibre.
Yeah, Calibre is cool. I have pulled it down and I've used it a little tiny bit, not a whole lot, because I don't do a whole lot of ebook reading. Oh, I don't do a whole lot of ebook reading, but if I do, it's not generally going to be at the desktop either. But it is cool that it's out there.
I don't use it for reading per se. I use it more for managing all the ebooks I've gotten. Mm-hmm. I started back at least 2012 using it. So that was managing ebooks for the Palm ebook format.
What do you do with all those ebooks once they're managed?
It makes it easier for me to put them onto my phone, or in the past onto my Palm PDA.
You read an ebook on a tiny little phone screen?
I even also use it to put it on my Chromebook.
Could see that. Believe it or not, Rob, you can actually read a phone on a tiny little phone, or an ebook on a tiny little phone screen. It's kind of a pain.
One word at a time.
I know you
one
can.
word at a time.
Just, but why would you want to?
Because you don't have the physical book with you.
Sometimes that's all you've got.
If you needed something to quickly reference, but I'm not going to kick back and enjoy a good book on a tiny little phone screen.
Well, the ebook reader I've got allows me to sync between my Chromebook, my Kindle, and my phone.
Cool.
And it also gave me the capability of putting books I'd borrowed temporarily from the library onto all of them, and then delete them once I was done.
That's actually handy.
Well, and a lot of times, you're doing what you can with what you got right now.
Yep.
I'm just not reading right now then.
I guess. All right, Rob, let's talk about something that is happening right now, and that is the shakeup at Chrome, and therefore the shakeup with Chromium.
Yeah, so with the Servo browser engine that I talked about in my last story, that became a Linux Foundation project back in 2018. But today, in 2025, it seems that the Linux Foundation is going to be financially backing another browser. It's, and it's always good to hear when an open source project finds new ways to secure funding and to move development forward. But, in this case, I do feel a little like we're giving money to billionaires who already have a lot of money. I don't know. Maybe not. Here's a story. So, as the Linux Foundation, well, they're partnering with the behemoth, Google, to create the, quote, supporters of Chromium-based browsers, unquote, fund. So it's a fund. This fund will provide money to open source developers working on Chromium-based open source projects. And because apparently Google didn't have enough money to support what is essentially their project, they're getting other people to help. Now, today, Google is responsible for around 94% of the contributions to the open source Chromium project itself. And then to a much smaller extent, Microsoft, Samsung, Opera, Golly, and others are also in there. But the hope is the new fund will bring in other developers from outside of these big corporate walls to help out in the development, get some funding for them so they can do some good work on this. Even though I think these big corporate people could pay for that too, but it's good to get some non-corporate money. I don't know who's going to donate to it either. Maybe it's just got to be these big corporate people anyway. But anyway, since Google loves to kill things that it creates, maybe this is their way to shield a project that they have been thinking about killing off. Maybe they're thinking it's about time they get rid of Google Chrome. And so somebody's like, hold on, let's find a way to save it so it's not gone. I don't know. Or maybe with the U.S. Justice Department calling for the breakup of Google, this is their way of showing they aren't in control of Chromium, and therefore it isn't theirs to sell off. I don't know what the reason is. Maybe they just want to be benevolent, get some funds and help some developers. Yeah, all potentially good things. There's some cynical views there, but money for developers is good. So with things as they are, maybe this will protect the Chromium project from the turmoils that Google brings. And the fact is, Chromium's it's the biggest player out there. You got the Firefox browser engine, and who knows what their future is either, with potential of Google money going away and other struggles in that area. We don't want Safari to be the only one left. That would be horrible. I'd have to quit browsing the web.
So, Rob, I'm going to be more cynical than you are. And I'm going to say that this is 100% a response to the U.S. Treasury Department threat, or Justice Department, excuse me, the Department of Justice, threatening to break up Google and threatening to make them sell the Chrome browser and spin it out from Google. I am convinced that this is 100% a response to that. It is the beginning of the process of moving the Chromium project to the Linux Foundation, and that gives Google some cover against no, we don't completely own and control the browser ecosystem. Look, we're just a part of this Linux Foundation project. And I think it also sets them into a better place if they do indeed need to try to sell the Chrome browser itself. It's just one less way that it's tied to them. So I think this is directly related to all of that.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know what
no objections.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't know what it'll change though. Really, I mean, it's kind of a paper move because what does Chrome support that Firefox can't? Now, there's some things they don't, but is there any proprietary stuff that
Electron apps?
I mean, there are other ways to build Electron apps without using Chromium. There are some features in Chromium that have not landed in Firefox yet.
but they could, right?
PWAs.
if this isn't the end of Firefox.
No, it's not the end of Firefox, not yet.
No, they're going to keep Firefox. Google will pay a lot of money to keep Firefox going.
Not if they don't own Google anymore.
If they don't own Chrome anymore?
Or Chrome, I mean.
Well, true.
What do they care?
Yeah, that's been part of the prediction is that if Google is forced to get rid of Chrome, then Google is going to stop paying Firefox money to exist. And yeah, that's an interesting.
One of my biggest
conundrum
beefs with the Firefox browser engine or whatever, maybe it's the Firefox web browser itself, is the fact that they ended support for PWAs. The future's coming. Like, we don't like the future.
That might be coming back, by the way. They in our conversation, this has been several weeks ago, a couple of months ago maybe, we had a couple of guys from Firefox, from Mozilla on Floss Weekly, and we had it was me and David were on there, and David says, "Well, what about PWAs? Why did you guys kill them?" And the guy's like, "There is a reason, but we've opened the door to maybe bringing those back." And I think there was even a bug report that he told us to go to, and like, if you feel really strongly about PWAs, go and let us know at this bug report, and we're going to see what we can do. So that might be coming back to Firefox.
I'll need to find that bug report because I'd like to throw my name in.
Yeah,
And
sure.
What are PWAs?
Progressive web apps. Do you need me to explain further? I guess we could explain for the audience.
Give it a 2-sentence explanation.
2-sentence explanation. It's basically turning a website into more of a desktop app.
It's installing a website so that it behaves more like an application. Yes. Okay. I will tell you something else that Firefox is working on that is really, really fascinating to me, and that is there is a patch set bouncing around inside the Firefox bug tracker right now that adds HDR support for Linux. Now, it's buggy, and they've got some other things. They're like, well, this really needs to land first, and that really needs to land first. But yeah, it's very possible that Firefox is going to have working HDR support before Chrome does. And I find that hilarious. All right.
Cool.
Yes. So I tell you something else that's cool. I think it's cool. And some people out there think it's very not cool. That is the Raspberry Pi 5 16 gigabyte edition. This just recently got announced in the past few days by the Raspberry Pi Foundation. And it is on sale. The Pi 5 16 gig is on sale for $120. And various people have different opinions on that. I heard some people say that is ridiculously too much money. I have seen people say as a result of this, well, I guess the last Pi I bought was the last Pi I'm ever going to buy. I've heard people say, well, you can get one of those little tiny Amazon. It's not the Nuke. It's not the NUC branded, but little tiny Amazon Intel based computers for this price. And I get all of that, but at the same time, it's all kind of silly. So if you either cannot comprehend why someone would need a 16 gigabyte Raspberry Pi, or cannot comprehend why someone would willing to pay $120 for it, then the fact of the matter is that this is not the machine for you. It was not made for you. You are not the target market for it. And that's fine. You really don't need to get angry over the fact that there is a market. There is a market for this. I promise you, there is a market for this. And the Raspberry Pi Foundation is 100% within their rights to try to make a machine for that market. And so let's talk about the market. And there are two big ones that come to mind. The one that Raspberry Pi themselves talked about is those that are using a Pi 5 as their desktop computer. And having 16 gigs is handy. It is nice to have the full 16 gigs of memory if you're using it as a desktop. That is one market. But the other one, and the one that I think really is probably going to be even more common, is where people want a cheap-ish ARM64 compile target. They want to be able to do something like run GitHub runners on it, or some other place where they want to be able to compile a bunch of things. And the fact that it's 4-core, it makes sense to try to do 4 compiles side by side. And there are times that 8 gigs is not quite enough for that. So pushing it up to a 16 gig memory, it makes sense there. Jeff Geerling covered this, and he was also talking about things like if you're using the Raspberry Pi to serve websites, which is a totally legitimate thing to do, sometimes those websites take a lot of RAM for each of the individual sessions that they pull up. And so if you have more than 3 or 4 people trying to pull up the same site at the same time, you need to be able to give it more RAM than just 8 gigs. So there are reasons, and there are legitimate reasons why this thing is going to sell. People are going to want it. It may not be for you, and that's okay. I was just blown away. Like, I saw so much hate from people like, they've given in to corporate greed, and the corporate, that's why they become a corporation. That's why they're charging so much for this. It's actually fairly simple. Like, there's a really, really simple algorithm. So it's like the base thing is it $40, and then it's $5 per gigabyte? It's something like that. Yeah, it's $40 plus $5 per gigabyte of RAM. And that is the price for the entire Raspberry Pi 5 line.
And the base one's 2 gig. It starts at 2 gig. Right?
Yeah, I don't think they make a 1 gig Raspberry Pi 5.
Yeah, when I saw your title that said about the new Pi 16 and why you shouldn't be upset, I'm like, what? Who's upset? That's awesome.
People are upset.
It's more there.
I thought
of course it's going to cost more.
I thought maybe people were
broke
upset because they
$100.
didn't have enough memory on it.
Yeah, it broke $100. That's people just, the Raspberry Pi is now $100.
I mean, I get it was awesome when the first original one was $35. That was awesome.
And how much was the memory then?
Weak.
Like baby 512?
Yeah,
megs?
512 megs.
And the cost of the memory?
I think it was DDR3 too.
And this is going to be DDR4, correct?
I think so.
Darn, not DDR5. That's what I'm mad about.
Nope, not yet. Not yet.
You got to get mad about it. Get mad about it being DDR4 and not DDR5, right?
Yeah, living in the past. Come on.
Yeah.
No, I'm mad because it doesn't have 2 10 gig network ports on it.
Even one. Does it have one? It's not 10 gig.
No.
Gig.
I think it's just 1 gig on the network ports. It's got the exposed PCI Express though, so that you can put
a 2.5 gig connection to the PCI Express.
Yeah.
And I think the Pi 5 or even 4 and 3 probably can actually support the full 1 gig, whereas I know the 1 and maybe 2 couldn't actually. You could never actually achieve a gig or even half that, I think.
Back when those came out, did you need more than a gig?
No, you couldn't even achieve a gig there. It was more like 400 to 600 megabits per second.
So Loquacious, let's deal with this. Loquacious says, for some reason I thought the Raspberry Pi was designed so that impoverished people would have access to computing. It was designed to give educators a platform to be able to put computers in the hands of school kids. That is what it was made for. The original Raspberry Pi was sold for $35. You can, right now, if you can find it in stock, you can get a Raspberry Pi 4 Model B with 1 gigabyte of RAM for $35. It is still out there. That is still a reason. That is still a thing that you can do. And the Pi 4 with 1 gig, as long as you're not trying to watch, 4K video on it, you're not trying to compile on it. It is still a serviceable machine for fooling around and understanding what how computers work, to learn. Like you can still emulate the Oregon Trail on the Pi 4 with 1 gig.
Yeah, and those are all still available.
Yeah,
but
so what has happened here though is all of the rest of us that are not a part of education, we have looked at the Raspberry Pi and we've said, this thing is amazing. And for some of us, it's because it's got GPIO. For some of us, it's because it's this big in comparison to a normal computer. And there's a bunch of different reasons why people just have gone nuts over it. It's good hardware. It's got good support. So I don't think there's any shade to be thrown at Raspberry Pi for also building units that make sense for these other use cases.
Yeah, you don't have to buy that model. You can stick with the lower end models.
Yeah.
I've got the Raspberry Pi 5 8 gigabyte model because they didn't have the 16 gigabyte at the time.
You would have bought the 16 if you could have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
My gaming system only has 16 gigs of RAM in it. And I realized today that I think I need to update that or upgrade that, but it still works fine.
I think what people are forgetting, that 16 gigabyte is for people who want a cheap computer.
Lots of Chrome tabs. Lots of Chrome tabs.
Well, they want a cheap computer or they're using the Raspberry Pi for something very specific. That's, it's not general purpose computer, but someone that's compiling, someone that's working on AI stuff, it might be there. But the biggest thing that I would say is the existence of the 16 gig model for the higher price does not in any way change the availability, the pricing of the cheaper models. Like it is entirely unreasonable for that to offend you if you're concerned about the educational element that the Raspberry Pi has always been for.
And I would disagree, Ken. It's not for people who want that cheap. It's not for people who want that cheap computer because you can already get other options, like many people pointed out, at that price range for a cheap computer. Like my Pinebook was $125, but it's lower specs.
And I bet you anything that this is a step to that Pi 500 Pro that Jonathan wants.
That is possible. There is a little snippet in here that apparently this was partially possible because Micron gave them maybe a custom piece of hardware. But I'm sure we won't be able to get the details on that, at least not at the moment. That would have to come from like Raspberry Pi or an official Micron statement, and they don't tend to make those about these kind of things.
Early next year sounds like it's time to get who was it from Raspberry Pi you had on Floss Wiki?
Evan Upton.
Get him back on.
We might do that. We could see about doing that. Before then, though, way before then, it will be time for Jeff to tell us about KDE Plasma 6.3.
Yes, so last week we touched on this topic, but now it's official. KDE Plasma 6.3 is out for beta testing. Now, this coincides with KDE Gear 24.12.1 and KDE Framework 6.10. So we've just discussed in the past how these three kind of components, Plasma, Gear, and Frameworks, work together to create the entire KDE environment. However, today we're only going to focus solely on Plasma. Each of those have updates and improvements as well, so it's everything's up leveling. So what's new and changing in 6.3 Plasma? Well, let's dive into the details. And we have now the ability to clone a panel and the ability to set a keyboard shortcut to move windows between custom tiling zones based on directionality. There's support for remembering the active virtual desktop per activity and the option to prefer screen color accuracy within KWin. Additionally, we can now have low battery notifications for wireless headphones that will properly expose the battery information. And you can also configure your touchpad to be automatically disabled when plugging in a mouse, which I personally love. I hate it when I plug in a mouse and I have to manually go in and set the touchpad to be off. We have now even better fractional scaling, so that's continuing to get improved. Widgets placed on the desktop are now slightly translucent, and when you have a network hotspot that you set up with your system, it will assign a random password for extra security. So you don't have a default basic password that people could guess. It's always going to give you something randomized. I mean, you can change it if you want, but the initial out the gate security is going to be improved because people can't automatically know that you're using password 1 or whatever the default used to be. KDE Plasma 6.3 also takes advantage of a kernel message, which we've talked about this before previously on the show, how the kernel's supporting this better. But now KDE hooks in and it will better prompt a user when the system terminates an app because it's running out of memory. So rather than just kill it and you're like, what happened to my Chrome or my whatever? Now you're going to see that, hey, the system was severely running out of memory and it killed the app so that it could keep the system from totally crashing. Another security enhancement is that Discover Package Manager will show when apps are directly packaged by their developer or by a verified and trusted third party. And if you're downloading an app that's packaged like Flatpak, the installation progress will be more accurately shown and will take into account when any new runtimes must also be downloaded. So this will all be calculated in the progress. So you're downloading a Flatpak, and rather than getting stuck someplace, you're thinking, what's going on? It's going to better show you that, oh, it had to download all these runtimes and dependencies with the Flatpak that the Flatpak would be dependent on, because it would all be packaged inside, but the other things to make it run, that'll be calculated correctly now. Mm-hmm. Now, take a look at the article linked in the show notes for more details, because I skipped over several updated items. And by following the link in the article, you can go to the official announcements page and see the change log, and there are hundreds of updates that have been made. So the article only covered a small bit, and I only covered a small bit from the article. So there's a lot of changes in KDE Plasma 6.3. And in case you forgot, we should see the final release of 6.3. So it's in beta now. It's going to go officially released on February 11th, barring any major issues. And if you're a system integrator, tarballs will be available a week earlier on February 6th to give maintainers a little bit of time to integrate them into their distributions. So I'm excited for KDE Plasma 6.3, and I can hardly wait.
Yeah, I do. I too am looking forward to it. There's some neat things that landed there. I bet in Fedora it's not going to land until Fedora 42. So I may do the thing again where I grab the KDE packages from the next version of Fedora. I've always had that work reasonably well. Live a little dangerously there.
I've been playing with the nightly builds of Kubuntu, and they haven't updated yet, but I'm thinking it should be soon now. It wouldn't surprise me the beta hits in, and we can try it out.
Yep. If you want to keep up to date with the latest KDE, there are distros specifically for that. Well, why?
Yeah, but what kind of fun is that if you're not running a nightly build? You got to have a little excitement of it may or may not break every update.
It's true. The problem with the one that Rob is talking about is that it's going to be running, at the moment, not too terribly old version of the Linux kernel, but give it a few months, about a year, and it'll be a terribly old version of the Linux kernel, and all kinds of things are not going to work because of that.
Okay, quit dissing Ubuntu.
It's so hard.
Ubuntu Studio 2410 is running a KDE Plasma version 6.1.5. So
but 6.2 is out.
Yeah, so you're behind.
You're behind.
I'm on Ubuntu. But it's closer than it used to be.
That's true. Doing better than
because we talked about last week, Ubuntu in general, their Canonical's trying to push a little more cutting edge. Maybe it's not cutting edge, maybe, because you're not going to bleed as much as certain rolling distributions. You're just kind of on a bruised edge, you take a few bumps and stuff, but you're not going to really
it's like the butter knife edge.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what about Linux Mint? What version of KDE do you run if you get Linux Mint?
I don't think you do. You run Cinnamon, don't you, Rob?
Yeah, Cinnamon is or mate. If you
and Rob, this one is for you.
Thank you.
In fact, it's coming from NeoWin journalist Paul Hill, just for you. Now, Paul wrote about Linux Mint 22.1 Zia undergoing final testing of its ISO before the stable version is made available for everyone. According to the Linux Mint website, the Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE editions are all undergoing testing right now, and if they pass, they will start to filter out to the Linux Mint mirrors before an official announcement is made a couple of days later. Paul states, despite the fact that Zia is only a point release in the Mint 22 series, it is still a substantial update. Zia comes with new power modules, Nightlight integrated into the settings. Rob, are you looking forward to Cinnamon 6.4?
I'm looking forward to its sweetness.
And as well as new artworks and other improvements. One interesting improvement is Linux Mint's modernization of the apt dependencies by transitioning to AppKit and Captain. Didn't you talk about that a couple of months ago, Rob?
Oh yeah, that was quite a while ago. But that did come up with their change they were making there.
I think but AppKit is replacing AppDaemon, providing a streamlined library for package management operations with updated functionality, and Captain unifies the features of JDebi and AppDurl into a single, easy-to-use utility. For those not familiar with Linux Mint, versions 22, 22.1, 22.2, and 22.3 will all be based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS and receive updates until 2029. Unlike other operating systems, it's not necessary to stay on the latest point release if you're happy with version 22. You can stay on that until 2029 with no issues or nagging. Though I bet Rob will hop to another distro before the end of the year.
You'll
have to give us a review of AppKit and Captain after you try them out.
Yeah, your distro hopping idea is a safe bet. I have installed Linux Mint. I'm starting to work on it. I'm looking forward to seeing how the upgrade process goes.
Yeah, that should be interesting. Back one of the last times I worked with Linux Mint, there was no upgrade process to go from one release to another. It was just like, I guess you get to reinstall it. Do they actually have an upgrade process now?
I think so.
Paul Hill didn't go over anything about that, but I'm sure Rob will be able to tell us how that goes.
Yeah, I know Zorin did not have an upgrade process until like last year, I think. But I thought Linux Mint did. That hasn't came up in any of my anything I've ever looked into.
See, Rob doesn't ever stick with the Linux distro long enough to have to upgrade it.
Yep. Time to upgrade. That just means reinstall something new.
Yeah, he's on the hop upgrade path.
That's why I was on a rolling distro for so long. There was never a point where I had to upgrade the thing. That's why I stayed on Arch for 2 or 3 years or whatever it was.
Got a suggestion on one that you might want to try after Linux Mint. It's Orion Mint or Orion Linux.
I'm thinking of trying I think it's tin box or tin can Linux. Tin can Linux is one I'm thinking of trying out.
Yeah.
Is that based on Linux from scratch?
No, I just saw it go across my feed. I have not dug into it this week. It looked like a very minimalistic. I don't think it was any of the mainstream desktop environments, but other than that, I didn't get a whole lot further into looking at. But there was something on Reddit about it getting updated. Or no, somebody was just making it. I think he just released it.
Yeah. So, Rob, are you going to look for a Budgie desktop when you go to a new distro?
You know, Budgie is always has been an interesting looking one, even if often forgot about and missed from my mind. Mm-hmm. So, as predicted, Wayland continues its domination and replacement of X11, Xorg, whatever version of that you want to call it. So, and as seen in other desktop environments this week, a desktop environment that, this is a desktop environment that I often forget even exists. I don't know why. I've tried it. It's good. But this week, Budgie announced version 10.10 should be released this quarter. And so for the rest of you who also aren't familiar with this niche desktop environment, it came out of the Solus Linux distribution project, which it's not based on anything. That's one of its own built. I've tried that too. Maybe that's where I tried Budgie. It was pretty nice, but I don't know if it's got legs to last a long term. It's kind of dipped sometimes and came back. He seems to keep going at it. But anyway, this to continue. It was been developed by Joshua Strobel, but is now available in other distributions, such as there are spins and flavors of Ubuntu and Fedora, and it's probably in other places too. I haven't really looked that hard. So the guys there at Budgie, they have been working hard. The guy, I don't know if it's just Joshua or what. He's at least the main guy. He probably has some contributors. But anyway, they've been working hard to integrate. And it's been an option in some versions of 10.9. But with 10.10, they are planning for Budgie to be Wayland only and will no longer support X11, Xorg. It's no more X. X is gone. Been saying this for a while. Get out of here, X. So the current Wayland support is done through the popular LabWC compositor, which I know we've mentioned in various contexts before, but it's one of those guys that works behind the scenes. So that LabWC compositor is what they're using today, but they are working on their own compositor that should show up, I don't know, in one of the future releases, maybe in 11. It's kind of amazing for such a small team to be doing so much work, but Joshua must be a pretty smart guy. Anyway, in addition, Budgie 10.10 will come with updated keyboard layout, nightlight, for those who like tweaking your desktop for nighttime instead of getting blasted by light, task list, and workspaces applets, as well as the implementation of the display configuration batch system. Budgie 10.10 will be the last release in the 10.x or 10. Series, with the next release after this being Budgie 11. On Budgie 11, Joshua says, quote here, while we have already been working on some aspects of the experience that will already apply to Budgie 11, we have not yet started on Budgie desktop itself. And make no mistake, we will show it off as we work on it. And when we have something that you can start messing with, we will have a way for you to do it too. So Budgie 11, just another domino. No, there we go. Another domino falling to my prediction of Wayland domination.
Well, I mean, it's inevitable, right? There's no other outcome. There is all of one developer that is seriously working on X11, and that is not even for the Linux desktop. That is for the BSD desktop. Of course, everything's going to go to Wayland.
Yeah, even these little niche guys, XFCE, Cinnamon.
If that's the case, who's going to continue doing maintenance on X Wayland?
Well,
that's different. That's a translation layer.
Yeah, so
and Wayland is still the same team as X Wayland and X. I mean, it's all under the same umbrella. So
what's interesting is X Wayland is actually, I believe, the actual repository. It is part of the old X11 repository. So something that you might actually see here before too long is X Wayland getting spun out into its own project. It does not live inside of the X Wayland repository, or that does not live inside of the X11 repository.
And really, the one serious person working on it, it's more bug fixes and things, things like that. It's not major feature upgrades or anything like that. And actually, as time goes on, X Wayland is going to become less and less important as more and more things become natively Wayland.
That's going to have a very long tail, though.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Very long.
But I mean, it's
probably as long as the Xorg's life.
Well, so I mean, there are so you think about this, there are proprietary programs, there are video games. Let's just talk about video games. There are video games that have ports to Linux. Those are always going to be X. Those, there are some of those that are they're set in stone. They're never going to get another update patch. They're never going to go to Wayland. And so X Wayland is the answer for that. You might eventually see a project come along that replaces X Wayland to do the same thing. Something almost like Wine or the SDL compat. I could see X Wayland eventually making its way into the SDL compat library. Because that's the only place where it comes up anymore is like old games. So I don't know. It's going to have a very long tail. X Wayland will be around with us for a very long time.
And I think we're going to revisit this question again after my last article.
We can do that. What's that, Jeff?
And I was going to say, unless the game is also in Windows, then it might be better just to run it in Proton and say, don't worry about X, and we'll just run the Windows version, and it's all taken care of.
Sad but true. The only compatible API for Linux is Windows.
Yeah. So, if a tiny little niche desktop environment run by pretty much one guy can progress and move it to all Wayland, any of them should be able to. Sometimes there's an inverse relationship between the number of people working on something and the amount of work that can get done quickly. Doesn't always work that way, but sometimes it does. Yeah. There are some hurdles.
There are arguments that way.
Exactly. That's part of it.
Yeah, they're not hurdles that they should be. There's ways to overcome them. It's possible. There are struggles, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah. All right. So I've got an interesting story here. And that is that the LGPL got tested in court in Germany. And this is something that I at least pay a lot of attention to when these sorts of stories come along. And so a couple of things here. One, there is this sort of nightmare scenario that open source people sort of worry about, and that is that a license like the GPL will go to court and a judge will look at it and say, because this license has this problem, the entire thing gets tossed out. right? And that has repercussions everywhere. That hasn't happened. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. The GPL and the LGPL were written by very smart lawyers who actually knew what they were doing, thankfully. But still, every time one of these goes to court, we watch it very carefully because what a judge decides has a lot of potential impact because of precedents and common law, things like that. So the LGPL went to court. It was, again, it was in Germany. It was in Berlin, I believe. It was against AVM, a router manufacturer. And the case was brought by Sebastian Steck, who's a German software developer. And he was also backed by the SFC, Software Freedom Conservancy, SFC. And they brought lawsuit, and the specifics was that there were things in this router firmware that were under the LGPL, the lesser GPL license, that while the source code was there, the things like the make files and the kernel layout information was not there. And so while you could look at the source code, you could not actually compile your own version of it to run on this particular hardware. And they came and they said, the LGPL says that you need to do this as well. And according to the article, here's an Ars Technica article that I've linked to. According to the article, after the lawsuit was filed, AVM, the manufacturer in question, did provide all of those, the additional source code and scripts and things that were asked for. But for one reason or another, and this probably has to do with the details of the German legal system, the suit went ahead and went to trial. And that's been quite a year ago, a couple of years ago that happened. We're just now hearing about it because things are finally making its way through the legal system. And the LGPL held the day. There were no, major hits to it. In fact, as far as I can tell, there weren't any hits to it. It confirmed the power of copyleft, and it survived the challenge. So that's really interesting, and it's good to see. One of our Twitch users, Magic Thighs, is reminding me that common law is not a German thing or a European thing. It's just a UK and a US thing. Yes, that is correct. Common law is UK and US. I am not a lawyer. I do not really even play one on TV. I understand a few of these things, but obviously not all of them. Regardless, it is good to see that the LGPL held up in court.
Always good.
Yeah.
Deserves an applaud.
Now we will see what happens in the Vizio case in the United States that is also making its way through court.
Is that still going on? That's the one where people want to see the source code that they use?
Yeah. So that one is interesting because one of the big questions about that case is whether an individual that just bought a TV actually has standing to even bring a court case, to bring a lawsuit. And so far, the judges have ruled that, yes, you do have standing. You are enough of a party to the contract or the license, whichever the GPL is. That's one of the things that lawyers fight over with the GPL. Is this a license or is it a contract? And that has gotten ruled in different ways, I believe, across the years.
Yeah.
But so far, that has been allowed to continue. And Vizio tried to get it thrown out, I believe, on those grounds that, well, this person is not a party to this contract and therefore can't sue. And the court so far has said, well, yeah, we're going to let it happen and see, where it goes.
Yeah, and what that's about, to put a little more clarity on that is, when someone receives open source software, they are supposed to be able to see the source code. Mm-hmm. And so somebody receiving a Vizio TV, there is open source code or open source software in use on that TV. Yep. So they're suing, saying that they should be able to see their source code.
Yes.
For those open source projects in use.
Yep, absolutely.
From glancing through the article you've got linked, it looks like Cisco's also very familiar with this.
Yes. So that's some interesting history. That's where the OpenWRT distro of Linux came from, because there were these little Linux routers that was also, there was a suit brought, and that's how that source code got opened up. And then, the OpenWRT project was built off of that. So very, very interesting history there. We have been here for a while. Let's move on and talk about Flatpak and what's new with Flatpak, Jeff.
I know, me, right? I know on this show I might be considered a Snap fanboy. I mean, Rob tells me constantly I am. But I've actually used all types of packages, and I don't really have a preference. I just like teasing Rob. Just don't tell him that. He never listens to my segments anyway. In all actuality, though, I use whatever package the software comes in, and I don't really have a preference, really. I just use whatever works. And to prove that, I'm going to talk about what's new in Flatpak with releasing version 1.16. It's been 2.5 years since the last major version change, which was from 1.14. So what does 1.16 bring? I'm glad you asked. First, there's a new USB device listing, and it now supports KDE search completion. It also supports creating a private Wayland socket with the security context extension, allowing a compositor to identify connections from sandbox apps as belonging to a sandbox. Although I won't list out the function names because they're a little long and nobody likes hearing all that, there's better compatibility when running 16-bit executables in some versions of Wine. There's also an HTTP backend variable that allows projects like GNOME software to detect when they're compatible with the Flatpak library. Additionally, there's support for terminal emulators to detect and display the progress of Flatpak operations on their graphical user interfaces. And for sub-sandboxes, so sandboxes started by sandboxes, if it's started by Flatpak portals, Flatpak apps now inherit environmental variables from the Flatpak run command that started the original instance, rather than from the Flatpak portal. So now this will fix the behavior of the Flatpak GL driver's environmental variable and similar features. So this way you're basically saying your permissions, the variables match with what it was originally started with and don't get changed or reduced because you have, a sandbox of a sandbox. Basically the simple way to say it. Old drivers and other ancillary items will now be cleaned up better when upgrading. The dbus session is reloaded to pick up any exported dbus services when you're upgrading. And as always, I've just hit a few of the high points of the article, so take a look at the link in the show notes to find out what else is in there, including items that you might find very important that I passed over. So in the not too distant future, everyone should be picking up 1.16 through their normal distribution channels, and looks like a very good release. So happy packaging.
Can you install Flatpak as a Flatpak?
No.
As long as it's 1.14, because it would be compatible with your system.
Is there Flatpakception? Is that a thing? Is it
No.
Flatpaks all the way down?
Flatpak is not packaged as a Flatpak.
But could it be?
It's like when the old
packaged as a Flatpak.
that'd be like in the old BBS days when people would say, "Oh, the new version of LZH is out," but they compress it with the new version of LZH. So then it's like, I can't open that. I need an older version, or it needs to be an ARJ or zip file to be able to open it.
And I know that's a silly thought of Flatpak as a Flatpak, but there are times that you do end up doing things like that. Docker in Docker is totally a thing that there are some times where that's really actually what you want to do. I bet you there is at least some use for packaging Flatpak as a Flatpak. I bet you it's out there. I bet you somebody's doing it or trying to do it or wish they could do it.
Could you see a Flatpak that contained a complete distro to include a snap?
Probably not. Probably
Be
not.
a lot of work.
It would be an app image containing a Flatpak containing a snap. Oh my.
Yeah. some of that you might be able to do. Snaps want to be able to talk to the underlying kernel and everything on a pretty low level. So I'd be surprised if you can put snaps inside of any of those others.
So it'd probably be an app image inside a Flatpak, inside a snap.
That might be possible.
All right, we're taking this too far. Let's keep this show moving.
All right, Ken, let's talk about civilization.
And you're talking about Sid Meier's Civilization, I hope.
Yes.
And it's the title for this article that first grabbed my eye. 'Cause I agreed with Liam Dahl's opening statement of quite a nice surprise. I have enjoyed playing Sid Meier's Civilization games since I played Civ 3. Anybody remember that one? Back on the PlayStation 3. Now we have Sid Meier's Civilization 7 from Firaxis Games, or 2K, getting the green tick of approval from Valve, as it's now Steam Deck verified ahead of the release that's coming. Liam states this verification was done on the native Linux version too. So we're looking good to go for the February 11th release, or February 6th if you have advanced access from one of the more expensive editions. We have been getting a lot more detail on Civ 7 recently from the developers through various first look videos and deeper dive blog style posts. Liam even links to the Diplomacy, Influence, and Trade post on January 8th that gives details on the changes to the diplomacy mechanism compared with the previous iteration. Liam's article also includes links to Fanatical, Humble Store, and of course Steam, if you're interested in finding out how to get it. Liam ends his article suggesting he may be absent after February 11th. I personally am glad to see a game developer working on a native Linux version, and hope this is a hint on the future of gaming in the Linux. Jonathan, I may not be available for the February 15th show while I prepare a review on Sid Meier's Civilization 7.
I see. I have played some Civilization in my years. I don't remember which version of it that I've played a lot of and really enjoyed.
I played a lot of Free Civ.
Oh, that too.
The open source version that's native to Linux. Of course, with this coming as a native port itself, well, I may actually go for this. Still not open source, but
indeed. You can't have everything, I suppose.
Yeah, it's close enough.
I don't think you're going to get the majority of the games being open source.
Indeed.
I've never played any of the Civilization games ever. Never
Jeff, have we got something for you to do this week?
This comes back to the question, and I didn't see anywhere in the articles or any of the research I did when preparing for this saying whether or not it's going to be using X11 or Wayland.
Interesting. Probably, I would guess X11 at this point. Would be my guess.
Or with it running through Steam, possibly using the Proton.
Not if it's native.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
so
know, I'm interested. Go ahead.
It's going to have either. So when a lot of times when we've gotten games in the past that say that they run native, what that actually means is that they've got a middleware library by, I think Feral was one of the ones that did this for the longest time. That was essentially just its own Windows API to X11 API conversion thing that ran in the middle. And so, yeah, it was native, and then it wasn't directly running on the Wine or Proton code, but it had sort of its own Wine-ish thing built into the binary. So I don't know for sure if that's what this is going to be, or if maybe their engine actually does support the Linux backend.
You can think that as a mini Proton or mini Wine when they just cut everything out except to run develop just what to run that game, and they don't support anything else. But I'm kind of surprised they have a native version. Just from I've heard from some developers that it's easier to make it work with Proton because the one thing about the Windows API is it's very stable versus Linux. Things change, and so it's harder to develop for versus, okay, you have DirectX, it's just pretty much always the same. It doesn't have the variation that Linux can have.
There is one particular problem that has been very difficult to solve inside of Proton so far, and that is anti-cheat. That's a real problem to do inside of Proton because anti-cheat is looking for some really low-level Windows APIs to talk to the kernel, and you don't necessarily get those APIs in the same way. Like, you can emulate those APIs, but you're not talking to the kernel in the same way over under Proton. And so one reason why they may want to go with a true native release is if Civilization 7 is going to have a very active online multiplayer, and they want to do some sort of anti-cheat solution inside of it.
Do you think anti-cheat is... Go ahead.
Jeff first, and then Rob.
Do you think they're going to continue having anti-cheat in the kernel because Windows has talked about locking everybody else out of the kernel? They'll have to come up with something else to...
I think what I've heard is that was overblown as to what was really going on there. And that's not really going to affect anything in there. But what I was going to say, I mean, Civ is like a strategy turn-based. I don't know of a lot of ways you could really have a cheat on that, because a lot of that can be really all done on the server. It's not like a first-person shooter where a lot of it has to be processed locally, and you just have to trust that what you're telling the server you shot and hit, you really did hit or whatever.
You really think that the Civilization multiplayer server is going to track how many units and what kind of units each player has when they can just offload that to the end user machines and then try to protect it with anti-cheat? I do not have nearly as much faith in the developers of Civilization 7.
And with the Civilization games, there's not really a reason to cheat because it's more of exploring.
Oh, no. End game for those was always either build the really big things or wipe out the enemy.
If there's two people playing, there's going to be somebody trying to cheat.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, if you have two or more people playing, there's always somebody that's trying to figure out a way to become top dog.
Yep.
Which is sometimes cheating.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to some command line tips. And I believe we have Rob up first, and you're going to talk about K-Shift. What is K-Shift? Is that a new kind of transmission for cars?
It's a transmission for those using KDE. So K-Shift, it's a small utility to automatically change your KDE desktop theme based on time of day. Or you could set it for more dynamic, such as sunrise and sunset. K-Shift can change the color scheme, icon theme, wallpaper, desktop theme, and or you can also have it trigger to run a command if you have some kind of command you want to run along with that. So you can almost have it do anything. This is a Python program, so you install it with pip. And while K-Shift is running, you can also apply a theme via the command line. So for example, if you run K-Shift theme night to apply the night theme, even if it's, maybe it's during the day, but you want to check your themes out. You want to cycle through them all and test them without waiting for that trigger to hit. You can just do the night, do the day, do whatever other ones you have configured in there. So you can cycle through these, have a nice dark wallpaper at night, a bright, cheery, happy one in the morning when you wake up. So if you are a KDE user, like a lot of these other people on this panel are, not me these days. I used to be. I was a KDE user from like 2000 to sometime in early 2020, and I hated the other ones, but I've moved away. Not that there is anything wrong with it. I just wanted to see other desktop environments. And so anyway, if you're a KDE user and you like a little variety in your themes, or you enjoy light mode during the day, dark mode at night, check out Kshift on GitHub by it's by the person's, or their handle on GitHub is just, or their user, I guess, is Just Joking. So if you search for Just Joking Kshift on GitHub, you should find it. Otherwise, check out our show notes, and there's a link there.
All right, very cool. Who is next? It is me. I am next. I've got a really simple one for you. If you find yourself writing PHP code and you need to run that PHP code and you don't want to set an entire web server up on your desktop to do it, you can use PHP-S to do so. You just go to the directory where your index.php is at, and you run that. You can also tell it, localhost :8000 if you would like to, and that'll give you that'll give it to you on it'll bind to localhost and only on port 8000, and you can live troubleshoot your PHP code right there. And boy, I've used that pretty extensively for at least one customer that has a PHP-based website. It's super useful if you're doing PHP development. All right, Jeff, how do we stop the bomb and save the world?
Yes, this week's command line tip is the tar command. And while Ken did touch on it in the previous episode, he focused on like different compression methods, and he didn't really cover the basics of tar. And even if somebody else covered it and we didn't have an Excel sheet, it's been a while, so a refresher to our new listeners seems appropriate. Now I have 2 links in the show notes. The first one lists several examples of basic tar uses, and the second is a link to the XKCD cartoon about writing a valid tar command line to save everybody, because it's how you disarm the bomb. So after this segment, you should be able to save your friends and family, because you'll be able to write a valid tar command without needing to look it up on the internet. Tar was originally released in 1979, which is 46 years ago, and it's used to collect a lot of files into a single archive file, commonly referred to as a tarball, and the name's derived from tape archive, as it was originally developed to write data to sequential devices with no file system of their own, such as magnetic tape systems. So now the article in the show notes covers several things you can do with the tar command, but today we're going to focus on creating a tar file, extracting a tar file, and listing the contents of a tar file. These are going to cover the vast majority of tasks that you will perform with tar as just an average user. Sysadmins and pro users are going to get into the weeds more, but if you're just the average person, those 3 things will cover a lot of what you want to do. So first, we're going to take a look at creating a tar archive, both with and without compression, and the command line to create a tar archive or tar file is tar space -cvf space what you're going to call your tar file space and then path to the file or files. Now, if you'd like to add compression, you can add a Z right where to your CVF option to get GZ compression, or instead of a Z, you add a J, which will give you BZ2 compression. The rest of the command line stays the same. Now, maybe you get a tar file and you want to extract it. And this one's even easier because compression, or easier than the compression, because for both uncompressed, GZ compressed, or BZ2 compressed files, it's all the same command line. So tar will handle it totally on its own. It's tar space -xvf space and then the file name. And finally, if you want to see what's in a tar file without extracting it, you use the following command, and it's the same thing. Compressed, uncompressed, doesn't matter. It all's handled by one command line. Tar space -tvf space file name. So I'm not going to go into more detail here, but the article in the show notes shows you how to extract single or multiple files, extract files based on a wildcard, or remove single files from an archive. And honestly, the article is simplified because if you look at the man page, tar is an extremely powerful command with many, many more options and switches that the article doesn't cover. But, happy archiving.
Yes, tar is just used everywhere. I will tell you a story about tar just the other day. We're working on uploading builds, and this one project, we use a weird build system, and there's reasons for it. But one of the things that we do is we grab these libraries and we put them in the source code, and then to be able to get it to build offline, because a lot of the various build systems online, like the Ubuntu PPAs, right? When you go to build something for a PPA, it strictly prohibits connecting out to the internet during the build. So we had to figure out how to make our build system happy with the files and the folders that we put in there so that it would not try to connect to the internet. And come to find out, one of the prep steps for uploading a deb source package is it goes through and it strips out all the .git folders. And I needed some way to maintain those. They had to stay there. And the solution was to put them all inside of a tarball, upload the thing with the tarball, and then the script on the build side was to untar it before building it. And it was really ugly, but it worked. So tar shows up all over the place.
Well, the funny thing too is, I was looking at the history a little bit because it's been around for forever. And there's actually a PAX command that was supposed to replace it. But I noticed it's not even on my system, and it was basically like, it's not used like tar is. Tar still the majority usage versus PAX.
Yeah.
Because it just works.
Yeah. All right, Ken, tell us how you broke your machine yesterday.
I want to tell you how I fixed my machine today.
There you go.
But this week, I'm going to be covering the Pipewire command that starts a Pulse Audio compatible daemon that integrates with the Pipewire media server or allows you to confirm that it is already running. For those listening, in the show notes, I have linked a document containing screenshots demonstrating the various options. So if maybe we should do cover how to pull up the show notes for listeners sometime, but you can pull it up and follow along while you're listening that way. The first screenshot that I'm going to show is showing using Pipewire-Pulse along with the -H or the --help, and of course the --, version to get the version that you're running. Now, the second and third screenshots are going to show the output after using, and let's go ahead and pull up that second screenshot. There we go. Using the command Pipewire-Pulse followed by -V for verbose. And as you can see, it starts running, giving you a lot of information on the screen about what Pipewire Pulse is loading as far as modules and what configuration files it's reading. And on the third screen, it shows the rest of it. Now, for those of y'all listening, the screen's got green comments, yellow comments, and red comments. The green are just notifications. The yellow has a W indicating it's a warning about something. When I did this yesterday, I already had Pipewire running on my system, so it was finding that it couldn't do certain things because of that. And the red was showing warnings indicating that the address it wanted to use was already in use in most cases. But to show you why I had problems, I actually ended up trying to start up the audio for my system today, and it wasn't finding any devices available through Pulse Audio. I actually had to open up the terminal and launch this command to get it to show them. So this command saved some of the changes I was playing around with yesterday in addition to trying out this command.
That is a bunch. Are those individual devices? I'm trying to read your screen.
Let me expand the... what it's showing is updates as it's... as the Pulse server gets information from Chrome.
Ah. That's all of your Chrome tabs making noise.
That's just the one Chrome tab for Restream.
Oh, okay. Oh, is that logging for every like audio packet that it sends?
Yes.
Aha. Cool.
And that's because I did the verbose when I launched it.
There you go.
I don't think I can go back to the screen I'm showing.
That's all right. Okay, very cool. Good to know. Good to know how to get more information out of Pipewire. I like it.
Especially if you're playing around and for some reason your devices disappear and you've got a muted volume indicator on your taskbar.
Yes.
I'm always playing around.
We know, Rob. We know. All right. Well, thanks for that. We have covered the news. We've covered the tips. We've got some good stuff. I'm going to let each of the guys get in the last word. I am tempted to count that as Rob's last word and just skip him, but I guess I'll be nice. And we'll let Rob plug it, whatever it is that he wants to plug, whatever weird social networks he's a part of.
All right, then. So, thanks for the donations to get me started on Linux Mint. Or maybe I should say, I'll wait till I get to my review to in a couple months to give you
that's with the Cinnamon desktop?
That is with the Cinnamon desktop, yes, because that's actually what I was really reviewing as Cinnamon. But Linux Mint is the best way to get a good view of the Cinnamon desktop. So I've installed it. I'm getting off the ground on it, and I'm not going to say any more about it yet. We'll let you know as time progresses. It's too early. It's too early. But and I'll have some clips maybe along the way to share with people who want to see how great or not so great, we'll see, Linux Mint Cinnamon edition is. But until then, or maybe this is where you'll find the clips. Who knows? If you're not following me, you're not going to know. But you come to robertpcampbell.com, links to my LinkedIn, my Twitter, and my Mastodon. And if you just love what I do and you want me to keep coming back and doing more of it, you click on this coffee cup and you can donate me coffees in $5 increments at a time. So one coffee, that's $5. 10 coffees, that's $50. You do the math if you want to do more.
Yeah, very cool. All right, Ken.
Well, I want to recommend reading Christine Hall's article on a new conference about everything open that may be replacing Australia's long-running linux.conf.au. I've got a link to it in the show notes for anybody that's got the time to read. So I know Rob's not going to read it.
What, Ken, were you talking?
Let me unmute myself.
All right. Anything else?
That's
okay.
it. I don't think
Jeff.
anybody wants to hear about what my laptop has.
All right, Jeff.
Not much to say. It's since we're running long, I picked a short little poem for today. Roses are red, violets are blue. For the 85th time, stop calling hard drives CPUs.
Oh.
Have a great week, everybody.
Oh, I could tell you stories about that. Yup.
Oh, yeah. Anybody
And
that's
stop
done-
using the optical drives as cup holders.
Yeah. Yeah, all of you that have
Why?
done,
What else do you
tech
need them
support-
for
Yeah,
today?
Those of you who've done tech support professionally or the family tech support, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Well, I've heard people call their computers their hard drive.
Yep, that's one I've heard too.
I've heard storage called memory and memory called storage.
I mean, those are a little bit more understandable.
Yeah, I mean the memory one is often called wrongly. I mean, they're out of storage and they say, "Oh, I need more memory." And like I had a family member recently said they wanted more memory for Christmas, and so I got them more memory. And then they're looking at their hard drive storage and like, so how much is this? We haven't put it in yet, but they're like, at that time, like, well, how much is this going to be then? You know, right now because it's in red, barely anything left. And I'm like, oh, you wanted storage? So I have a light Christmas present coming for you in a few days.
Yep. There you go. The one that probably always irritated me the most is the monitor, thinking that the monitor was the computer.
Mm-hmm.
That was a classic.
Yeah.
All right. It is.
HBO does have, or HP does make monitors that are the computers.
Well, the
called-
all-in-ones are a a but that's not what
many of
this
them
was.
They're
Many of the vendors make all-in-ones. They're so fun to work on.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not any worse than a laptop, but
All right. Well, this has been our new feature segment, Tales from Tech Support, but it's done now. I do want to let everybody know that you can find me primarily over at Hackaday these days. I've got the security column that goes live on Fridays. I've got Floss Weekly there. We record on Tuesdays, and that gets posted on Wednesdays. You can check both of those things out. We would love to have you. We are so glad that you're here. Those listening to us live, I believe, at least most of you are. Well, no, not most of you. This goes out live to everyone. Everyone should be part of Club TWiT, and that is the way that you can give back directly, support the shows that you love. You can get the show video on the download, get access to the Discord, all of that good stuff. Take a look at Club TWiT. It's about the price of a cup of coffee per month. I've been known to say per day. It's not that expensive. It's only a coffee per month. But we do appreciate those that watch and listen live, both on the live and on the download. And we will see you. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then on the Untitled Linux Show.